Good evening and welcome to the virtual open house for the SmartTrack King-Liberty GO Station. My name is Nilgan Air Coach and I work for Metrolinx. I'm the Senior Manager for Community Engagement with GO Expansion Stations in Toronto, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator for this evening's event. As you're looking at the screen, you'll note that this event is being closed captioned. You can turn on closed captioning by clicking on the CC icon button at the bottom of your video player. We've scheduled this meeting to last 1.5 hours. It'll start with opening remarks from our special guests, Deputy Mayor Anna Bailau and MPP Merritt Stiles, followed by a brief presentation and then a question and answer period. But first, a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Thank you. We also like to start our meetings off with a reflection on a safety moment. So I thought if you would indulge me today, because we've kind of recently had the end of daylight saving time and the days are very short and the nights are long, I thought I would share some tips about how to stay safe on the road and at home. There's many tips on the screen. I'll just pick a few to remind us to, for example, keep a minimum distance of 1 meter when passing a cyclist on the road, to stay alert and pull over if you're feeling fatigued, to slow down, don't drink and drive, that's an everyday rule, take transit, and at home, this is a great time of year to do things like check on your smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, change batteries, replace furnace filters, and also practice some self-care, eat well, and get enough rest. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Mayor Anna Bailau to give some opening remarks. Deputy Mayor?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here today. I can hardly believe that we are at the first open house for the SmartTrack station. It is for the SmartTrack station, but it actually addresses a few goals that we've had in the community for quite some time. And I think we can admit as a community that we kind of have a love-hate relationship with these corridors. You know, many people used to talk to me in the community and say, you know, we just see these trains go by and we can't get on them. They just pass by our community, but we can't get on the train. Many times we've had these conversations. And about a little bit over 10 years when we opened the West Toronto Rail Path, I think people really started to see the potential of local benefits, the local benefits that these corridors could have for this community. And so today, the West Toronto Rail Path is a gem. We're expanding it. But most importantly, we now have a plan to start getting people in Davenport on the train, to start making use of these lines and these corridors for the local use as well, so that we just don't see the trains go by, but actually get on the trains with regular service, stations in our community. And in this case here on West Queen West, something that many people from the Friends of West Toronto Rail Path, people on the West Queen West community, people on Liberty Village have strongly advocated for, which is to connect the communities, to have a pedestrian and cycling connection, to connect these two communities. So this project will bring that. It will bring the access to transit to this community, much needed transit that hopefully will alleviate some of the usage on some of the very busy streetcar lines, like we have King, like we have Queen. Our Dufferin bus is quite used as well. So this will be another access point to transit for people to travel. But also will bring connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists to come in a much more easier way to make use, to visit, to shop in our local shops in West Queen West and Liberty Village. And then take the West Toronto all the way up to DuPont once it gets done as well, because it's in the works as well. So very excited to see this happening, very excited to see this project moving forward. This is something that the mayor had committed to we have 3 stations in our community as well. So we're definitely not going to see just trains go by, but we're definitely going to be able to get on the trains and to move south, move north, and have great transit connections in our neighborhoods. So thank you all for participating today. Looking forward to hearing from you, but excited to see this project moving forward.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll ask MPP Stiles if you'd like to say your opening remarks.
Thank you, and hello everybody. It is great to join you tonight. As was mentioned, I'm Marit Stiles, and I'm the member of Provincial Parliament for Davenport. Some of you will live in that riding, some of you may not, but you know, as Deputy Mayor Bailão said, we are actually we're pretty excited about this meeting, and I know it's the first of many opportunities that there will be, but and I won't repeat a lot of what Deputy Mayor Bailão said, but you know, there are obviously some benefits for the community here, and we're going to learn a lot more tonight about what some of those benefits may be, some of what the plan looks like. I wanted to tell you that Metrolinx and the city gave us in my office a bit of a heads up some time ago. And since then, my staff and volunteers and I have been kind of working our way through the area where these 3 stations will be located, knocking on doors and speaking with folks to make sure that, first of all, there's some information going out there. And I'm happy to say many people had information about what was coming. But also to hear from you about some of the concerns or the issues you might want raised. For the most part, I know that we're looking for things like dates, for information about construction timing. But I also know that you've been raising certain issues that I'm hearing from you with Metrolinx in the city already. For example, I know people are interested in finding out how much they'll have to pay to get from this station, say, to one of the other stations or to Union. Are you going to be able to use your Presto Pass? That's the kind of stuff we talk about in terms of fare integration. And I've raised this with the CEO of Metrolinx recently in a meeting we had. I know that some in our community are also concerned about things like the increase in trains, the frequency, and the bell ringing. And there has been some talk about Metrolinx conducting a pilot project on that. It's not actually underway as far as we know, but we have spoken to the CEO, Phil Verster, and he has assured us that he is looking at some good alternative solutions. So this is a conversation still ongoing. And I know that folks are interested in hearing from Metrolinx and the city about things like overnight construction. What can we expect? Will we have that? And of course, we talked as well, and we will talk, I think, here tonight a little bit about things like access points. So these are just some of the things I wanted to mention because I wanted you to know that we are hearing from you. We are listening. Tonight is, you know, an opportunity to get more information and also to ask some questions, but you'll still have opportunities to engage in other ways. And I did want to also mention that please, as we're going door to door, ensure your voices are heard. If you don't connect with me directly, I want to be sure you have my contact information. So I'm just going to say it, but you can find it online because you can reach my office at 416-535-3158 or by email. Go to my website and find it. And if you have anything else that you want us to be raising that you don't think was addressed here, please let us know. Again, we are working closely all together to make sure that this project works for us in our community. As Deputy Mayor Bailão said, this is an important opportunity and we want to make sure we get some good stuff out of it. So thank you very much, and thank you again for letting me say a few words.
Thank you, MPP Stiles, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your opening remarks and for your time this evening joining us. So we're about to get to the presentation, but I want to give a little bit of guidance about the Metrolinx Engage page that you're viewing this virtual open house on. So you'll be able to follow along with the presentation on your screen, but you can also click on the presentation materials link below and download the slide deck for your reference later on. If you're scrolling down the web page, you'll notice that a number of people have already submitted written questions. Take a minute and scroll through and upvote any of the questions that you'd like to see answered We like to say that great minds think alike. So before you ask a question, see if it's already been asked. And if so, upvote it instead. This way, because we will be answering the questions in the order of most votes. Once we get through the written questions, we'll have an opportunity to take live questions. You can ask a live question verbally by joining the Zoom room. Again, if you scroll down, you will see a yellow Join Zoom button, and that will take you to our Zoom room. My colleague, Colin Burns, will be moderating the Zoom room. So once we get to the question and answer period, Colin will recognize you when you raise your hand, and he'll turn on your microphone when it's your turn to speak. At that point, we'll ask that you ask one question at a time. You can always write out additional questions on the Engage page. We might not get to every single question during the meeting, but we will provide written responses to all the questions that are submitted on the web page afterwards. Again, if you're just joining us, this meeting is being closed captioned. You can turn on closed captioning by clicking on the CC icon on the bottom right corner of the video player. Could I have the next slide, please? So the purpose of this evening's open house is to update the community about the SmartTrack Stations program. We want to continue the engagement that has happened previously around the stations program with the community, and to share early detailed design concepts specifically for the SmartTrack King-Liberty GO Station. And with that, I'm going to introduce this evening's panel. I can have the panel screen, please. So we have a large panel from the city. We can get our cameras. Thank you. We'll give everyone just a minute. So from the City of Toronto, we have Edna Coven, Program Director, Station and Strategic Initiatives with the Transit Expansion Office. Also from the city's Transit Expansion Office, Anthony Irving, Manager of Stakeholder and Community Relations. And from City Planning, Greg Tokars, Program Manager, Transit Implementation. We have for Transit, which is Metrolinx's Technical Advisor, representation from there, David Hopper, who is a Senior Transportation Engineer. And from Metrolinx, Gretel Green, Manager of Environmental Program and Assessment, Joyce Young, Stations Program Sponsor, Julie Chatton, Project Manager for Stations Capital Delivery, and myself, again, Nilgan Erkoch. I'm the Senior Manager for Community Engagement. So we have quite a large panel here to take your questions, but first let's get to the presentation. So I'm going to kick it off by asking Anthony to unmute himself, and we'll begin our presentation.
Thank you, Nilgan. Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Irving. I'm in the City of Toronto Transit Expansion Office, and we'll quickly go over the program of the SmartTrack stations. Next slide, please. The stations program will improve transportation choices within Toronto by leveraging existing infrastructure to serve more people. Combined with the GO expansion program, SmartTrack will transform heavy rail infrastructure in Toronto from a regional commuter service into an urban rapid transit network. Next slide, please. With 5 additional stations, St. Clair Old Weston, King-Liberty Station, what we're talking about tonight, Bloor Lansdowne, East Harbour, and Finch Kennedy, with an all-day two-way service, increased frequency, quieter and faster trains, SmartTrack will expand transit access for all Toronto residents traveling within and beyond the city. Next slide, please. SmartTrack will provide access to reliable transit and offer earlier transit expansion solutions, which also includes the subway program. While that's under construction, the Ontario Line, Scarborough Subway Extension, the Eglinton Crosstown West Extension, and the Yonge North Subway Extension. Service improvements from the SmartTrack Stations Program will provide walkable access to rail service for 83,000 residents and 91,000 jobs. The 5 new stations are projected to bring approximately 110,000 new daily riders by 2031 to the rail network and reduce congestion on the roads and emissions throughout the region. Next slide, please. Another benefit is the so-called network effect and the opportunities that come with a strong, more flexible transit system with seamless connections across neighborhoods and communities, more frequent service, and more new stations like SmartTrack. And SmartTrack stations will go along with all the other expanded projects that are happening as mentioned, as you can see on your screen here. Next slide, please. And quickly, the program, we can go through timeline from October 2019 as part of the Ontario-Toronto Transit Partnership Agreement. The province and the city committed to working to advance the stations program. Back in February earlier this year, Toronto City Council approved the updated terms that will be incorporated in the agreement in principle. And this past August, the city and the province signed the Ontario-Toronto agreement, making a full endorsement for 5 new stations in Toronto. And currently procurement is underway, and we expect construction contracts to be awarded as early as next year, and the stations will be targeted to be operational in 2026. Next slide. And with that, I'd like to hand this over to David Hopper, who's going to go through the technical details of the King-Liberty GO and SmartTrack Station.
Great, thank you, Anthony, and good evening, everybody. If I could have the next slide, please. So the station location is just north of King Street on the rail corridor. We can see in the map here, King Street and Liberty Avenue and or Atlantic Avenue and Hannah Avenue in Liberty Village. Along the south side of the rail corridor, we have Joe Schuster Way connecting from King Street out to Dufferin. And then on the north side of the corridor, we have Sudbury Street paralleling the rail corridor from King Street to Queen Street. So nestled in here, we have a lot to try and achieve. There is good transit connections that will be made as well. So we connect to good connections to the King streetcar and the Ossington and Dufferin buses, as well as the Queen streetcar and the Lakeshore streetcar. Go to the next slide, please. So the existing conditions today, the neighborhood is relatively flat. The major geographic feature is where King Street and Queen Street drop down to dive underneath the rail corridor. So we do have the benefit of a fairly easy access, although it is very heavily developed. So it is challenging to fit these features in and find ways to connect it all together, but we believe we've done a pretty good job at that. The photograph on the left is at King Street. We can see the end of the King's Club development, and the little copse of trees there next to the bridge will be one of the entrances to the station. The photograph on the right is on Sudbury Street at the corner of a bell. We can see the King's Club condos in the distance across the rail corridor, and the copse of trees right in the middle of the photo is actually the second entrance to the station. So it's actually fit in quite nicely here. We've spent the last 3.5 years working on plans to fit it in, and we're looking forward to sharing those and getting some feedback on what you think about the station. Can I have the next slide, please? So this is an early rendering of the station. We can see there are 2 platforms in the rail corridor that will serve the Kitchener corridor trains. On this image, we can see on the right-hand side is an entrance on Joe Schuster Way, just where it turns from running north to the rail corridor to turn at the corner of the King's Club development to run west. So there'll be an accessible entrance there with stair and elevator to take you up to a bridge, to go over the tracks to come down onto the 2 platforms. And at the far end of that is the access on Sudbury Street. There'll be an elevator tower that will be expandable to include a stair and a connection to a new development at 99 Sudbury. And then we can see running off to the left is a sloped walkway, which will come down paralleling Sudbury Street to about mid-block between Abel and Queen in order to provide community access. The idea is a clean and contemporary station using a lot of fritted glass to create a sense of light and space, as well as controlling temperature when the sun is shining, as well as in the winter. The platforms will have full canopies and as well will be fully accessible for everyone in the community, fully meeting the AODA requirements. There will be bicycle parking at all of the entrances as well, so people can choose to either walk or cycle to the stations and have facilities available for the beginning or the end of their trips. You can also see in the distance there's a second bridge that will connect the two platforms out to King Street. That will connect down not only to the north side of King Street, but also to the what's called the King High Line, or the pedestrian pathway running behind the King's Club development, which will be expanded to run across the railway bridge over top of King Street and tie into the laneway that connects down to Snooker Street directly into Liberty Village. So we think there are a lot of good pedestrian and cycling connections that are being made as part of this station that will serve not only those who use transit, but also those who just want better connectivity in this community. Can I have the next slide, please? This is a closer view on Sudbury Street. It's similar to the view we saw before. The little copse of trees at just north of 99 Sudbury has been replaced by the elevator tower, and we can see the slope walkway running along to the north. The intention here with this sloped walkway is it will connect to the south end of the West Toronto Rail Path, which is currently going to terminate just south of Queen Street and just north of where our station is. So we've been working to make sure that the entrance will provide continuity for cyclists to be able to take your bicycle along the rail path and then up this walkway and across the bridge to get across to Joe Schuster and across into Liberty Village. We're also looking to make sure that our design is compatible with future developments. We have been discussing this with the King's Club in terms of how we connect to their development, as well as looking at possibilities for when the 99 Sudbury Street and possibly 55 are redeveloped in the future. There's a lot of civil works that have to be done. We do have to make some minor changes to the alignment on Sudbury Street. And so there's a lot of issues around drainage and utilities and connecting everything into the station. So we spent a lot of time working on all of those issues, and we'll see more details on that as the project evolves. The next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the West Toronto Rail Path is currently into construction, or is just ready to be awarded into construction for the last segment coming down to just south of Queen Street. We're fully aware of those plans and have actually worked with the team to make sure that the south end of the rail path is compatible with the sloped walkway that we're providing into the station, and will also allow cyclists and pedestrians to go around the station entrance to continue on their trip down Sudbury Street towards King Street. We're also in the design looking at how we can protect for that rail path to be extended further in the future by going up the slope walkway and then behind the properties along Sudbury Street down to King Street. This is only one segment. The other part of our SmartTrack team is working on the connection between the Davenport Diamond project, which ends just at Bloor Street, connecting down from there down to Dundas to make a second connection to extend cycling facilities even further along the rail corridor. The next slide, please. So this is an overhead view of the station and the station facilities. So just to get you oriented, you can see towards the bottom right, there's a sort of an orangish peachy color. That is the western portion of the existing rail bridge crossing over King Street, which will be upgraded to a pedestrian connection. We see King Street running sort of from there towards the lower left of the figure, Joe Schuster on the left-hand side on the south side of the rail corridor, and Sudbury Street on the north side. In light blue, we can see the two island platforms that are being inserted in the rail corridor to provide access to the Kitchener corridor tracks. There will be 7 tracks through the station area eventually. 6 will be built as part of this project. And then beyond the station, there will be 8 tracks to serve the 3 different rail corridors that come through here. Towards the upper left end in red is the services building. We have to be able to provide power and communications and other services to the station. So that will be a building on the south side of Sudbury Street. Just beyond that will be the entrance to the slope walkway, climbing up to the the grade area, which is the bridge spanning from the corner of Sudbury and Abel across to the bend in Joe Schuster, which, as I mentioned, will provide fully accessible access to the platforms and across the rail corridor. At the far eastern ends of the platforms, there will be a second elevator and stair up off of each platform to another bridge that's sort of shaped like a backwards F. That will, the two tines of the F will lead to a stair and elevator tower, which will connect down to the High Line path to provide direct access into Liberty Village without having to cross King Street on foot, and will also connect down to the north side of King Street for those who want to access the streetcar. So those are the main highlights, and if there are further questions on the design when we get into the Q&A session, I'd be glad to answer those. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Gretel Green to walk through some of the environmental work that's been done, and we'll take it from there. Gretel?
Hi. Just going to go through 3 or 4 slides. Happy to be here to explain and answer questions afterwards. So the environmental assessment for the SmartTrack King-Liberty GO Station was completed in 2018 in accordance with Ontario Regulation 23108 Transit Project Assessment Process, which we call the TPAP. During both the pre-TPAP and TPAP phases of public and stakeholder consultation and engagement, there was over 630 people who attended 6 public meetings, and we had 110 people attend 10 stakeholder advisory groups. These stakeholder advisory groups were comprised of residents and representatives from a broad range of stakeholder interests, including community, neighborhood, business, and institutions. In addition to those meetings, the City of Toronto and Metrolinx maintained project websites, encouraged public and stakeholder input via emails and phone, and we're looking forward to hearing from you now and reaching out early to hear what you have to say. So in this new phase of the project, our engagement efforts continue. Environmental commitments identified in the TPAP and those outlined in subsequent due diligence studies are being addressed through the design and construction phases of the project. During the 2018 EA, 3 properties were identified to have cultural heritage values. Oh, sorry, next slide. Sorry. I just assume you're just going to follow me. During the 2018 EA, 3 properties were identified to have cultural heritage values or interest within or adjacent to the station. The properties identified were 55 Sudbury, shown above, 99 Sudbury Street, and the King West Subway, which is on the right. Heritage impact assessments were completed in 2021 for all 3 properties to assess impacts and identify appropriate mitigation measures to address impacts. 55 Sudbury Street will not be directly impacted by the station. We will be, implementing mitigation measures during construction to protect the building from indirect impacts such as vibration. The King Street West Subway will be directly impacted by the station, but impacts will be minor and involve removal of a part of one retaining wall. A cultural heritage resource documentation report will be completed prior to construction and will include detailed photographic documentation of the bridge. Mitigation measures will be implemented during construction to protect the bridge from indirect impacts. Next slide. 99 Sudbury Street, which is shown above, will be demolished later this year, we hope, or in early 2022, and demolition notices will be circulated to the neighboring community. The land is required for station construction and track expansion. A heritage impact assessment recommended completion of a cultural heritage resource documentation report and an exploration of commemorative strategies. This report is underway, which includes detailed photo documentation of the building's heritage attributes. It also recommended preserving some of the bricks, which will be salvaged, and opportunities for reuse of those bricks are currently being explored. Commemorative signage at the station will also be explored as the design progresses in partnership with the city. And to the things you really care about the most. Next slide. So we're looking here at noise, vibration, and air quality impacts from the operation of the proposed project, and they were assessed in the EA through different environmental reports. These reports identify potential issues and required steps to mitigate these issues. Nitrogen dioxide, benzene, and benzene pyrene were identified in the air quality reports to be slightly exceeding thresholds, but these have very small effect on the ambient pollutant concentrations and do not require mitigation. Before construction, we do complete construction assessments and management plans with the contractor. These management plans will identify sensitive receivers and zones around the project. Activities will be identified through additional construction specific assessments that could impact noise, vibration, and air quality on the receivers and zones. So receivers are identified as sensitive. They can be, the condos around there, the townhomes, things like that are all identified, and monitoring of those are identified, based on where construction is occurring near those receivers. Laws, standards, and guidelines will set limits, such as noise exposure limits, that have to be conformed with and are included in those management plans. All this information will be captured within those management plans and are reviewed by Metrolinx, including air quality management plans, noise management plans, etc. Those management plans also include things, so the constructor will be required to identify best management practices, such as using, the most up-to-date equipment, Tier 4 generators, using things that are in good working order, to adhere to applicable laws, standards, and guidelines. They will also be implementing, obviously, erosion and sediment controls, street sweepers, water trucks, mud mats, things like that, to ensure that dust isn't getting onto the streets, being tracked onto the streets, and then, becoming an air quality problem. Trains and equipment will be using bells and whistles to notify workers as regulated through health and safety laws. That's here, but we will also be controlling those things when work is occurring at night, and trying to reduce those noises as much as we can. Continuous monitoring and will be required, and Metrolinx will receive real-time email alerts of any exceedances. Reporting, we have monthly reporting, weekly reporting, and for those exceedances, those come instantaneously. For operations, noise and vibration, with electrified trains, the station is not anticipated to experience any increase in noise levels. Operation vibration is generally expected to decrease, actually, due to the train pass by speed. So like the trains will be slowing down as they come by at the station, which actually causes vibration to decrease. And let's see, the next slide is going to be traffic impacts. So this is just good news. I can just say traffic will decrease because you'll all use the train. Done. During construction, to address traffic impacts during construction, a traffic management plan will be prepared and carried out during the construction period. Traffic management plan will include measures such as, notifications for advanced closures, detours, and advisory signage. To maintain traffic control, there'll be flagging personnel as required. There'll be notices to adjacent residents when we are, having to use roads to unload and things like that. Ensuring all residential and commercial properties remain accessible is a real priority for Metrolinx. And traffic management measures will be continuously monitored during construction activities and adjusted as necessary. In operations, as I said before, traffic volumes are expected to decrease once the station is constructed. The station does not include parking spaces or formal passenger pickup and drop-off areas we call PUDO. So no increase in traffic is anticipated as a result of the new station. Next slide. And I believe I'm handing it back over to Nilgün.
Hi, everyone. Oh, let me get my camera on. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Gretel, and thank you to everyone who presented. So I wanted to end our presentation with our contact information. As you know, this is one of our first and early engagements in this phase of the station program, of the SmartTrack Station program. So I am the Senior Manager of Community Engagement, and if you have any questions or concerns, you can reach out to our Toronto West Community Relations Office. I also encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-blast newsletter by going to metrolinx.com/subscribe. This Engage page will also stay up, so you can visit this Engage page. And we also have a web page on Metrolinx's site about SmartTrack. And from the City of Toronto side, as you know, this is a partnership. We also have contact information for the Transit in Toronto office and the City of Toronto's SmartTrack Station Program page as well. So that is the conclusion of our presentation. Thank you very much. and we will move over to the question and answer period. I just want to remind everyone again that you can submit a question in written format by scrolling down, and we will go through the written questions first, upvote the questions that you'd like to have answered, because we're going to go through those questions based on the number of votes. And then we'll move over to the Zoom room. You can join the Zoom room by clicking on the yellow Join Zoom button. And once there, you raise your hand and my colleague Colin will call upon you when it's your turn to speak. Unmute your microphone, and at that point, you can ask your question. So if I can have the panel, I'm going to start with our first question of the evening. And David, I believe this one is for you, and we have a few questions in the written questions about the number of tracks that will be available at the King-Liberty Station, and which train lines will have the ability to stop at the King-Liberty Station.
Sure, yeah, those are great questions. So I mentioned in the presentation there will be 6 tracks that go past the station when we open it. There will be protection for a 2nd track for the Milton corridor, or a 7th track. There will be 8 tracks north of the station by the time we get just north of Queen Street. And then again, I think there's 7 tracks that go down through the strong grade separation down towards Strawn Avenue. So the 2 island platforms are set up to serve the Kitchener corridor tracks. So all of the Kitchener trains, as well as in the future, there's a possibility of the Up Express trains stopping at this station.
Thank you, David. The next question is actually for you as well. Where will the pedestrian bridge be starting and landing be? So where exactly on Sudbury Street will the pedestrian bridge landing entrance be located, as per the artist rendering in the August 17th Metrolinx announcement? And there was, so where will the pedestrian bridge start and stop?
Sure, actually, could we put up slide number 18 with the plan of the station? So there are actually going to be 4 public access points. So along Sudbury Street, starting in the upper left, you can see the red box on the diagram. That's the services building I was talking about. And just beside that, there's a little triangle. That will be the entrance to the sloped walkway. So that is will allow you to access the station there. It's about halfway between Abel and Queen. Further down at the corner of Sudbury, where it turns away from the rail corridor, will be the 2nd access point. So that will have an elevator in the short term. And eventually, when 99 Sudbury is developed, the intention is for the developer to connect that with a stair as well to go with the elevator. That'll take us to the Western Bridge. And when we cross the Western Bridge, there will be a stair and an elevator to take us down to Joe Schuster. There'll also be a connection out the right-hand end of that entry at the upper level, which will connect to the pathway that runs behind the King's Club development along the south side of the rail corridor, which will connect us to the 3rd or the 4th major access point, which is the tower down in the lower right, which will provide access both from King Street and from the High Line up at the track level, up and over on the 2nd bridge down into the station. I think you're on mute there, Nilgan.
Sorry about that. Stay on the line, David. I think this next question is also for you, technical in nature, and it's about level boarding. Will the station be built with higher platforms to allow level boarding at all doors from day one? Metrolinx has previously released docs indicating level boarding was planned for future, and new platforms are being built with future provisions for raising. But why not do it now and avoid future disruption?
So thank you. That's a very good and actually a very complicated question. So we have been working with Metrolinx and a number of teams internally, looking at what's involved in moving to level boarding. like the subway today, which is level boarding at all the trains. It was built that way originally. The GO train service was built along freight railways, so the platforms had to be lower to avoid issues with freight cars. So the GO system evolved with platforms that are only 5 inches high and require 2 steps to go into the trains. So the challenge now is that we have 65 active stations, so we have a whole fleet of vehicles, and everything is designed around this 5-inch high platform. So Metrolinx is looking at the option. It's a bit like the Rhinoceros Party used to say, to be more British, let's drive on the left-hand side of the road, but for the first year, it'll be trucks and buses only. The challenge is we have to change the trains and the platforms all at the same time. And so they're still working through some of those details. So what we're going to be doing is we will have mini platforms at the 5th coach, which will load consistently across the line or allow for level boarding. And we are pre-planning for future level boarding by building the canopies high enough to allow the platforms to be raised. We're going to be putting in foundations to allow them to be raised easily. So we're doing everything we can to make the transition in the future easy, but right now it's just not in the cards to move forward with level boarding at this time.
Thanks, David. And I'm going to let you take a break. And the next question I am going to pose to Joyce Young, our head sponsor. So this is about final station name. Are the station names final, or will there be more consultation like with other Metrolinx projects? Liberty Village would be a better name and fit with other GO stations that are named after communities.
Sure, I'll take this one. I'll just make a quick correction. I'm not the head sponsor. I'm a program sponsor for SmartTrack. It's all right, no worries. So to answer the questions, discussions will be underway on how the stations will be named. Currently, there has been no decisions or discussions so far, but it will be underway.
Thank you. So stay tuned, TBD on that one. The next question I'm going to pose to Julie, our project manager for station delivery. And it is, will the trains have a loud bell ringing as it nears the station?
Okay, so this one is a safety question at this point.
Oh, did we lose Julie? What I suggest is we'll go to the next question. We'll let Julie. Oh, Julie, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me? I am.
Do you want to start where you froze?
Sure, sorry. Murphy's Law. It is a safety issue, and as per the Federal Rail Safety Act and the CROR rules, Metrolinx trains are required to ring the bells upon entry into the station and when leaving the station. That being said, SmartTrack stations are being designed to protect for bell cessation measures and technologies in the future. There is a pilot cessation project being explored on the Up Express line, specifically at Bloor and Weston GO stations, and the results of those in the future will determine how we proceed on that.
Thank you.
No problem. Glad I made it through.
We have another question. I think this one is for David again. And I have 2 questions here that I think I can package together. And it is, what is the, oh, I'm sorry, Julie, I apologize. This one is actually for you. And Yay. It is, what is the timeline for the station and the bridge? So when will construction on the station and bridge commence? And when is it scheduled for completion? And the second kind of question that I want to package with that is that, will, for example, the bridge be completed before the station and track work, or is it all scheduled to be completed at the same time?
It's all scheduled to be completed at the same time. We're currently in procurement, and we anticipate construction starting in the fall of next year. But during that procurement process, we will be going through construction staging. So that will be sort of finalized as to when the pieces are completed will be determined during the next year. It's anticipated that the station itself will be completed in 2026, and at which point we will be opening the whole kit and caboodle to the community for ridership.
Thanks, Julie.
No problem.
The next question I'm going to ask to Joyce, our program sponsor. Sorry about that. Will there be TTC fare integration? Will there be fare integration between TTC and the new SmartTrack urban stations? Having to pay for a GO fare plus TTC fare to use the station doesn't help the local community. We want a fully integrated transit hub.
So I'll start with saying that the future fare setting decisions will be made, just like the question said, within a broader context of the region. We will continue to work with TTC and the city and other municipal partners to make sure that we develop a fully integrated and regional fare framework. And we want to make sure that the travel experience is seamless across the region.
Thanks, Joyce. Gretel, I have this next question for you, and it is, when will the trains which use this track be electrified? I have a condo balcony on Sudbury Street, and the trains are loud. I'm worried about noise.
It's a good question. And we have electrification, as you know, which is an amazing service that's going to be working moving forward. And the contract for that project is going to be awarded in 2022. So once the contractor's on board, we're going to work with them to determine a schedule for construction and electrification. We have a lot of tracks to install, almost 200 kilometers, and we have to electrify 600 kilometers of track as well. So it's going to take a while. Construction will start in 2022 or early 2023, and we're hoping to have it wrapped up by 2032. And I know that's such a vague answer, but the contract is, going to be awarded and designed, so we can't say exactly where it starts and when it stops and what's going to go first. But everything should be electrified by, we hope, 2032.
If I could just add a little bit to that answer. So these SmartTrack stations, particularly here at King and at St. Clair, this is really early works for electrification. So the intent is to finish these stations first, and then the electrification will come through and be added afterwards. So the electrification in this area will likely be towards the latter half of the electrification program.
And I'll add, because that's not a great answer. I mean, David, you did a good job, but I think we're also, just so you know, I mean, we really take this seriously. We've done 3 assessments. We're looking at it. We're still completing additional assessments for noise. A wall has been identified, at Sudbury Street for electrification, but we're also installing exhaust noise silencers on existing and future Metrolinx diesel locomotives in the meantime. And that actually is going to decrease, 3 dB, which actually is a noticeable change in decibels. And we've actually done 56 locomotives, and we are trying to do 3 a month, estimating that the whole fleet will be done hopefully by the 3rd quarter of 2022. We're trying to reduce idling times, and when mitigation is the source itself is impossible, receptor-based mitigation. So we know this is an issue in the city especially, and we're trying to address it.
Thank you, Gretel. I'm going to ask, I know he's not a member of our panel, but we do have Brian Matthews from our property team at Metrolinx, and I have a question here that, Brian, I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind. Will any lands need to be expropriated for the King-Liberty GO Station, SmartTrack GO Station?
Well, good evening, everybody. Pleasure to be on. Principally, we've reached out to all the property owners who might be impacted as part of this station project. And that's pretty much all we can really say. The negotiations or discussions for the ones are private, and we would just defer to those discussions with them directly.
Thank you, Brian. Okay. Next question, I'm gonna ask David, and I have two questions here about integration or connection with the West Toronto Rail Path. I know you highlighted that I know you highlighted that in the presentation, but the question is, will the station be integrated with the West Toronto Rail Path? And sorry here, just make sure. Getting to the station. So I want to get to the station by walking and cycling. So when will that extension be in place? Or that
So thank you.
to the extension.
Yeah, so those are good questions. So the extension of the West Toronto Rail Path down to just south of Queen Street or just north of our station is nearly ready to go. I think that work is going to happen over the next year or so, year or two. The intention that we've been working with the city is that, yes, the sloped walkway that I was talking about along Sudbury Street, you can see on the plan here from the Red Services building up to the Sudbury entrance, has been designed to allow to connect to the end of the West Toronto Rail Path, but also to allow it to extend along that walkway up to the bridge, to use the bridge to go across to Joe Schuster, and then along the King High Line behind the King's Club development and down across the King Street Bridge directly down to the laneway that leads to Snooker Street. So that will actually, once you get to Snooker, you can work your way over to Western Battery and then take the new King-Liberty Bridge back over to Douro Street and carry on. In addition to that, we're also planning for at the entrance on Sudbury Street, we're planning it in such a way that if a solution is found to extend the West Toronto Rail Path further east, it can work with the entrance by going around the elevator and connecting into the 99 Sudbury development and carry on further south. So we're doing what we can to make sure that we are providing good pedestrian and cycling connectivity in the neighborhood. The intention is for the bridge connecting Joe Schuster to Sudbury to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that it provides continuity for neighborhood connectivity even when the trains aren't running.
Thank you, David.
I could add a little bit to that as well. Greg Tokars from City Planning. The West Toronto Rail Path connection to the station has been probably one of the most important things for the city. All connections were really important, but this one, because it's a major city initiative. And the West Toronto Rail Path has been connection at this point has been pretty much designed, but it was designed before we knew exactly how the ramp structure was going to come down to Sudbury Street. And we also, you can see in that drawing, the little square, red square where the service building is, the West Toronto Rail Path will terminate just west of that. So there's going to be a little bit of redesign to make sure that's seamless. And with the city, have been working really closely with the design team at Metrolinx, David and his folks, and Julie. And hopefully that will be a great connection and be able to connect all the way down into Liberty Village.
Thanks, Greg. I'm going to ask one more question here from our written submissions, and then we'll go to the Zoom room. But this next question is for Julie, and it is, what is the current plan to minimize overnight construction? We hope that given the negative experience of local residents with excessive overnight construction, that Metrolinx will find a way to minimize or mitigate overnight construction.
Yeah, it's a tough question. Everybody hates overnight construction. I get it. This is a very busy section of the rail corridor. There will be overnight construction, there'll be evening construction, there'll be some weekend construction. But there will be mitigation measures in place, and there will be continuous monitoring of noise throughout the construction period. And anything that exceeds certain levels will be flagged immediately, and we will either stop the work or we will mitigate it further. Or investigate the cause of the excessive noise. It is definitely an issue we understand, and we don't want to make your lives miserable. So it is something we will definitely work towards improving and hopefully minimizing the impact.
And I think I can kind of piggyback on that answer from a community relations perspective. We can commit to giving ample notification about overnight work, and also, as issues arise, that we will be available to you through our contact numbers and emails to work with you to figure out the best way to resolve and mitigate the issue. With that, thank you, Julie. With that, I am gonna turn it over to our Zoom room. Colin, are you there? And do we have any questions in our Zoom room this evening?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. So far we have one question, and I'm just going to go through the attendees here just to make sure there aren't any more coming up. But the question we have is from MC, and it's through the chat. And it was, are there any plans to add additional access points on Joe Schuster closer to Dufferin?
I think that would be maybe a question for David. And I don't know, David, if you want to bring up the slide to point out the various access points for the station. I'll let you decide how you want to.
Sure, I can maybe start on that and then maybe pass it over to Greg, because it's a sort of a planning question as well as a station question. So we did look to see how much access we could provide and where we could provide it. It's very challenging along Joe Schuster. There is a very narrow strip of green space between Joe Schuster and the edge of the rail corridor that is actually owned by the condominium south of Joe Schuster. That's actually an important community amenity. So when we looked at the number of access points, we really found the sweet spot was right at the corner where Joe Schuster bends to go down to King Street, which would connect us both to the High Line running behind the development, the Kings Club development, but also provide good connectivity on that side of the rail corridor. The challenge with going any further west is we would then need an additional bridge to span across, and that needs somewhere to land. And so that becomes a very expensive way to try and cover that off. I don't know, Greg, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, we've worked, I've personally been working on this since 2017, and then city planning and working with Metrolinx on the project, I think since the early days were about 2015. And that's one of the major goals that we had, was to have a lot of connections. This is much different than the older subway stations where, originally they had one entrance, or some of the older GO stations as well, which really, had one access point. The goal was to have as much as possible. And I think we've pretty much maximized this, and this is quite a bit of access for a single GO station. There is a possibility. You'll see in the bottom right-hand corner of the drawing, there's a little orange section. That was something we didn't really anticipate early on, but who would have known that there's a great big space on the King Street Rail Bridge with all those tracks. And so we're able to provide a really good connection down to the West Elm building and the building where the Mildred's Temple Kitchen is, and then that goes down Hannah Street. So that's something which is a little bit of a bonus. As far as Joe Schuster Way, I think we've got pretty good access from Joe Schuster Way, and I don't know if there's any opportunities further to the west. It would be additional cost and a lot, there's probably challenges as well trying to fit it in anywhere. This is I think pretty much the sweet spot as far as getting good access. So we will be looking at it, though. In the future, always looking at better access to transit stations from the city's point of view. You're muted, Nilgan.
I know, I'm so bad. I've done it twice now. Thank you, Greg and David. Colin, just checking in on the Zoom room. Any other questions or raised hands in the Zoom room?
Yeah, we have one more from Sean. His question is, Would there be any impacts to neighboring buildings, 38 Joe Schuster and 36 Lisgar, with geothermal pipe drilling so close to the construction site? And how can residents use the new station to access Pearson Airport without circling back to Union? It's a two-parter.
Okay, can we take one question at a time? So can you repeat the first question?
Yeah, sorry. And I'm realizing as well, these are from two separate people, my mistake. So Sean asks, would there be any impact to neighboring buildings, 38 Joe Schuster and 36 Lisgar, with geothermal pipe drilling so close to the construction site?
So that's a great question, and yes, we are aware of those things. We've done a subsurface utility investigation, and we've talked to the city about where public and private infrastructure is in the area. So we are aware of those, and we're doing everything we can. That's another reason the Joe Schuster entrance is located where it is, because it's actually on Kings Club property, so it won't affect the geothermal that's further west. And on the north side, we're across the street on the south side of Sudbury, so we're clear of that infrastructure as well. But if there are other things like that you know about the neighborhood, we would be glad to hear about them, because as good as our records are, local knowledge always is better than the records we have on file.
Okay, and I believe the second question in the Zoom room was about a direct connection from King-Liberty to the Up Express that wouldn't require kind of circling back to Union Station to access the airport service.
I can. Sorry, Nathan, there's a bit of a follow-up to that as well. Sorry, just a little bit of a follow-up to that as well. Could we transfer directly at Bloor to the existing Up Express station? So
yeah,
that's
so I was
probably
going to say
more
that's the way that to go to the airport, you would access the station here, get an outbound Kitchener train, and then either at Bloor Station or Mount Dennis or Weston, change over and get an airport express train by crossing the platform and then go directly into the airport. So it would involve a transfer, but you would be traveling in the same direction and you wouldn't need to backtrack to Union Station to make that happen.
Thank you. I want to remind people in the Zoom room that you can also ask a voice question by raising your hand, and then Colin will call upon you and unmute your microphone, just so that you're aware that that is an option for you as well. I have a comment in here in our written submissions that I thought I would just read. It's not a question, but it says here, we need as many transit choices as possible in Liberty Village. I have lived in and continue to work in Liberty Village. Multi-mode transportation options are so very needed. I support the ability for the West Toronto rail path to connect over the corridor using the station. So I just wanted to share that comment to the panel, so that, and we've already kind of discussed how the connection will be made to the West Toronto rail path and the multimodal options that we're considering. David, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so we talked about at the opening that the Kitchener trains would serve this station, but we're designing the station that eventually, should the choice be made, the Airport Express could directly stop at this station as well. So that could be a future enhancement at this station, which is another multimodal choice. So when the Up Express is being reviewed with electrified service and with the new St. Clair station and the new Mount Dennis station online that connects to Eglinton Crosstown, there is an opportunity to look at providing yet another service that connects here. So we're trying to plan ahead for all of those eventualities and allow for more connections to be made at these stations.
Thank you. We have a question about timing. I'm not sure, Julie. We did mention that the timing, this target completion is 2026 for the station. There's a question about whether the station will be operational in time for the FIFA World Cup in 2026, although I'm not sure if we've taken that into consideration, but I thought I would throw it out there.
I don't know. I'm going to ask a question completely full of ignorance. When is the FIFA World Cup in 2026?
I'm not sure, but maybe that's something we can explore for future.
Absolutely, we can make sure that that is at the back of our mind when we're looking at construction schedules, that we need to have it done by that date. So
I know people.
I know we We have also been looking, I'm working on another part of the GO network expansion, which is looking at the Ontario line connection at Exhibition Station. So there's a contract has just been awarded to expand Exhibition Station. That definitely will be done in time for FIFA. That was one of the driving factors of that. But yes, and since it is outdoor soccer, it's not likely to happen in January or February of 2026. Only Canadians and Norwegians and Russians are used to playing soccer in the middle of winter. The rest of the world wants to play soccer in the summer. So we believe that we will put that in our calendars to try and see if we can get things operationally in advance of FIFA, because we do know that this service, while it is a fair hike to walk from King-Liberty Station through the village down to Exhibition Place, there are a lot of people who already do things like that for events at BMO Field. So this would provide not only more transit opportunity to get to Exhibition Place, but also more opportunity to stop in Liberty Village on your way to and from events at Exhibition Place, which is another one of the neighborhood building exercises that is one of the cornerstones of this project.
I am sorry, but I'm going to have to interrupt. You're talking about soccer to a soccer fan, so absolutely, it's a very good point. And it's usually in June and July, so it'll be great weather, and it makes perfect sense. I would keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Also to support our local businesses, because as it was mentioned, I think it would be important if we attract people to come to watch the game. It'll be fairly easy to come from the stadium at Exhibition Place to some of our local businesses as well, and people to come down. So it's noted.
If it was badminton, I'd know more about it.
Colin, I'm going to check in with you. Any action in the Zoom room?
Yes, we have one more question from Tristan. The question is kind of twofold as well. It's will the Kitchener GO Express train stop at the station? And why does the Kitchener line need 4 platforms? Why not give 2 to Milton and Barrie GO?
So I can start with that, and then maybe Joyce and others can join in. So there are 3 rail corridors that run through here, and it's a very challenging spot. So what we've looked at is the intention in the longer term is that one of the platforms will be used for the Kitchener trains, and the other platform is being reserved for the Up Express service to the airport. The Barrie corridor is seeing a number of stations being added, including Bloor Lansdowne. There's a station at Caledonia to connect Eglinton Crosstown, and another of other stations along the line. And not only was it very challenging technically to get a platform to serve those tracks because of the curves in the tracks here, the number of new stations along the Barrie corridor increased the length of time that it takes to run the line, that it was felt that an additional station here was not really acceptable. The Milton service is slightly different in that it is actually dispatched a little bit differently because it runs on CP tracks outside of north of Bloor Street, where it goes out on the CP tracks, and the other ones are former CN. So there's a slight difference there. So we're looking to see if there's any possibility, but right now we don't see how we can connect the Milton trains in. So really we found the sweet spot was to put the 2 platforms in the middle to be able to serve the heavier duty Kitchener service and the Airport Express service as part of that corridor that extends out through past the airport out to Brampton and then out to Kitchener as part of the Knowledge Corridor. I don't know whether Joyce, you wanted to add to that?
Sorry, I'm just getting off mute. David, I think you've covered it all. I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Joyce. I don't see any new questions in the Engage page. Colin, what about you? Any more questions in the Zoom room?
None on my end.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Sorry, there's none here. No questions.
There's none, okay.
Actually, Nilgen, if we have some time, I've got one other thing I'd like to point out.
Yes, of course.
Could we go back to slide number 16? So in the studies that are being done as part of the electrification, there was a call for an additional noise barrier along Sudbury Street, along through this neighborhood. What we're also seeing is with this sloped walkway, which you can see here, it's actually raised quite a bit higher than a typical noise wall in order to get high enough to be able to span across the tracks to get to the platforms. And then when it comes down to grade is where we have the services building, which will also be taller than a typical noise wall. So while we're adding facilities on the south side of Sudbury Street, which on one sense block the view, they will also provide a higher than typical noise barrier, which will also help to reduce the amount of sound that's being broadcast out towards Sudbury Street and the lower floors of those condo buildings. Right now in this rendering, we were maybe a little generous with how visible the trains will be. We're looking at what we're going to do here to fill in from the walkway down in terms of possibly it's going to be translucent glass, or possibly it's an opportunity for some form of art to fill it in to buffer the sound, but also allow light transmission through it so that we don't end up with a dark streetscape, but we do end up with additional noise protection. So I think the added features of the way we're putting the station in can be seen as a bonus to help controlling the noise on the Sudbury Street side of the corridor.
Thanks, David. That helps, I think, provide some of that context of what the rendering is showing and not showing. So if we don't have any more questions in the Zoom room, just do one more check-in, Colin.
Yeah, sorry, there was just a follow-up from Tristan. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, there's a follow-up from Tristan about I believe it's still about the Kitchener GO trains. Just, he asked, how many express trains will there be?
So maybe I can start that. So there will be a mix of service on the Kitchener corridor of both local and express trains. And I know that I've sat through multiple meetings looking at the future service plan, and everyone is trying to crystal ball how many trains and where they'll stop. So I think there's two schools of thought. One is the express train should be express to Union, and the other is it should be express into the city somewhere. And so I think they're looking at opportunities here to stop both the local trains and the express trains, or some of the express trains. But that's an operational decision that I think will have to be made closer to the time that we start service. But that's definitely something we can pass along. I would think that having more trains stop here provides not only more opportunities for the local community to use the train to go to work, but also more opportunity for people to stop here to work at the jobs and enjoy the entertainment and other businesses in the area. So we will definitely pass that along to the service planning people. Joyce?
So I'll add a little more context. So for this station, we're expecting about 20,000 daily riders. And the service folks would definitely be looking at the scheduling based on the ridership as well.
Thanks, Joyce and David. We're going to wrap up the meeting. I'm just going to check in with the panel if there's any last comments, or from our special guest, Deputy Mayor and MPP Stiles, as we are wrapping up our meeting for this evening. Okay, well, in that case, I do want to thank Deputy Mayor Bailau and MPP Stiles and all of our panelists, as well as everyone who took time to join us today for our first King-Liberty SmartTrack GO Station open house. We will be continuing with our community relation and engagement efforts. We will be engaging through the Deputy Mayor and MPP's office, and as well directly with you. I will make a pitch again to visit metrolinx.com/subscribe and sign up for our weekly e-blast so that you can keep in touch and up to date on the works that are going around the SmartTrack stations in the west end of the city. If you have an inquiring mind, you can also sign up for the Toronto East newsletter, the Ontario Line newsletter, etc., etc. There's quite a few different newsletters by going to that website that you can sign up for. So otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you to our panelists, to our elected officials, our participants, and to our moderators helping in the Zoom room this evening. And I wish everyone a great evening. Thank you so much.